Today I turned 25, and strangely enough, this day began exactly the same way as hundreds of previous ones, with an alarm clock whose shrill ringing interrupted a shallow, anxious sleep, with mechanical movements in the bathroom, with a habitual glance at my reflection in the mirror, which seemed to distance me from myself every time, and with the same tired walking along the sidewalk to the office, past peeling storefronts, regulars at the coffee machine and a clogged shuttle bus in which I am invisible among dozens of the same gray faces. And before we continue, write in the comments from which city you are watching this video. Enjoy watching. On the way home, as if on a hunch, I went into a familiar grocery store, where the saleswoman indifferently scanned a small chocolate cake wrapped in cheap cellophane tape, on the surface of which, pink sticky glaze, the words crookedly appeared, "Happy Birthday." I did not expect lavish celebrations. I did not expect balloons, candles, or loud music, but somewhere deep inside there was a ridiculous, even childish hope that this year, at least for a moment, something would be different, that someone, even if accidentally, would remember. When I pushed open the heavy front door, the creak of hinges sounded in the emptiness of the entrance as the only recognition of my return, and when I entered the apartment, I felt the thick smell of fried butter and stewed onions piercing my nostrils, like a harsh reminder of a life in which there had been no place for me for a long time. Mom was standing at the stove, her back to me, concentrating on stirring the pot, and didn't turn around when I crossed the threshold of the kitchen. In the living room, Gaspard sprawled on the sofa, his massive figure filling almost all the free air. His eyes were glued to the TV, where the news or a sports match was blaring again, and his children, Gina and Matteo, seemed rooted to their phone screens, their fingers sliding non-stop on the glass, as if they lived in a different, digital reality, where my existence didn't matter. "I'm home," I said, trying to sound calm as I set the cake on the edge of the table. Mom turned her head and looked at the box. Confusion flashed in her eyes, and then a sudden epiphany. "Oh, Emily. Is it a cake? Wait, you have today. A birthday?" At that moment, everything inside me shrank with painful recognition. This feeling of being forgotten, of being a shadow in my own home, is all too familiar to me. I nodded, barely able to keep the tremor out of my voice. "Yes. Today." Gaspard got up from the sofa and, without turning off the TV, went into the kitchen, followed by Gina and Matteo, their faces still illuminated by the light from their phones. "Well, happy birthday," he said, and his tight, casual smile made me feel a little sick. "We really didn't give you anything. But, as they say, the main thing is attention, right?" Mom immediately nodded, picking up on his words as if they had rehearsed it in advance, and an uncertain, embarrassed smile appeared on her face, as if she hoped that this would be enough. I tried to smile back, muttering thank you gratefully, although inside everything was boiling with disappointment, which, as always, could not find an outlet. We sat down at the table, clinging to this pathetic excuse for a family tea party. I quickly excused myself and went to change my clothes, hoping to wash off the feeling of emptiness, and the desire to just disappear for at least one evening in the stuffy bathroom. When I returned, there was only an empty box and a tiny triangular piece of cake on the table, like a remnant of someone's indulgence. Typical. I silently sat down, cut a piece with a fork and began to eat, feeling the bitterness stick in my throat along with sips of sweetness. With every tiny piece I broke off, memories came back to me, not vivid, not happy, but those that painfully fit into the years of my youth. I remembered how everything changed after Dad's death. He left quickly, cancer, aggressive, merciless, left us only a few months. I remember holding his hand in the hospital room when my mother couldn't stand it anymore, how she forced herself to be strong, mature, responsible, even though I was barely 16 at the time. Mom broke down. Her days were filled with the senseless gloss of TV series, sleeping until noon and endless silence. I cooked our meals, mopped the floors, and did my homework at the kitchen table, as if there was some kind of redemptive power in it. When my mother met Gaspard a year later, I was initially relieved. He was attentive and courteous, and she smiled again, went outside again, put on makeup, and laughed. I thought, if she comes alive again, then it's not for nothing. I was 18 when they got married, and that's when I went to college, away to another state. I didn't realize then how much of a stranger I was becoming in this house. The holidays flew by in the company of friends, in an attempt to forget, to escape from what was beginning to cause a strange chill in my soul. When I graduated, my mom called me, crying. Gaspard developed health problems. He could no longer work full time. Her salary was barely enough. Gina was 14, Matteo was 12. They needed me. I didn't hesitate. I returned home, found a job as a marketing assistant, and reoccupied my old room, giving my mom most of my salary. It was a family, I told myself. Dad would like that. Back then, I still believed that it was temporary. But everything changed at 23. At first, there were subtle hints. My mother timidly asked if I could give more money, because everything had become so expensive. Gaspard increasingly made comments when I was on the phone after work. They say, "Don't shout, we're resting here." It was like I was being pushed out of the life I worked for every day. Then, as if on schedule, as if by some kind of internal installation, Gina began to look into my room more and more often and more attentively, not hesitating to enter without knocking under the pretext of taking a hairdryer, charging, or just asking something insignificant, and each time her eyes eagerly studied the walls, furniture, books, every object, as if I was calculating how much her things could fit here if the room suddenly, by some miracle, became hers and not mine. My personal space, though modest, became the object of her undisguised envy, which she no longer bothered to hide. One day at dinner, at the very moment when I had just taken the first sip of tea, she put down her fork, turned to my mother and sighed theatrically, "Emilia's room is twice as big as mine. It's unfair." She sounded like she was talking about a great social injustice, as if my room was the result of privilege, and not the only thing I had left of my father and what he was trying to preserve for me in this house. I've been listening to such complaints in silence for months, forcing myself to breathe deeper each time, reminding myself that she's still a teenager, that she doesn't get enough attention, that maybe her discontent is just a reflection of the general atmosphere in the house, saturated with tension and silent resentments that we've all learned a long time ago. Don't discuss it. But it all came to an end one evening when I returned home after a particularly exhausting day, the day when my boss, without looking up from his diary, announced that my colleague would get a promotion, despite the fact that I put my heart and soul into the work, stayed late, brought more results, and did not complain. I returned home exhausted, mentally empty, and barely had time to change my clothes when I heard my mother, as if waiting for the moment when I would be vulnerable, say with irritation in her voice, "Emilia, you really need to start giving us more for expenses. This electricity bill is just crazy." Before I could answer, Gina interjected, "And you might as well not use the bathroom for so long in the morning. You're always making me late for school." And, as if in chorus, Matteo added, "Yes, and you eat all the delicious snacks. Leave something at least." At that moment, something seemed to crack in me. I noisily put down my fork and knife on the table, their metallic clang cut through the silence, and, raising my head, I said, no longer restraining either fatigue or anger, "Are you kidding me? I pay all the bills in this house. And in case you've forgotten, this house legally belongs to me. Dad left it to me in his will. I allow you to live in it. Not the other way around." There was silence, thick and awkward, as if the air in the room had become thicker. Gaspard abruptly looked down at his plate, as if he had suddenly discovered something extremely interesting about mashed potatoes. Gina pursed her lips, and Mom turned pale and, on the contrary, immediately blushed. Her cheeks turned red, her eyes sparkled with tears, which she was still trying to hold back. They all knew I was telling the truth. The house really belonged to me. My father had made a will long before his illness, sensing that if something happened to him, I should be safe, I should have a place that would be mine. After his death, when I turned 18, I used a small inheritance to pay property taxes and keep the house without letting the bank get its hands on it. The rest of the dinner was dominated by silence. where every glance my mother gave me was full of silent condemnation, but I wasn't going to apologize, not this time. I sat up straight, ate slowly, consciously, as if emphasizing my right to be here, in this house, at this table, in this life, into which I was so diligently not allowed. Later, in the dead of night, when I was almost asleep, there was a soft, hesitant knock on my door. Without waiting for permission, Mom entered, closing the door behind her. Her face still bore traces of restrained tears, and her voice was stern but trembling. "We need to talk about what happened at dinner," she began without looking up. "You shouldn't have talked to us like that. The mention that the house is yours was superfluous. It's insulting. Is it a shame?" I repeated, feeling a wave of anger rise in me again. "And the way you all treat me, is it not offensive? I'm an ATM for you, who has to pay and keep quiet." Her mother's eyes filled with tears, an old trick of hers, a proven remedy when logic failed. She sobbed. "You're being selfish, Emily. We are a family. We gave you a house." "No," I interrupted calmly, but with cold confidence. "I gave you a house. This is my home. Here you see, again." She flared up, and resentment and wounded pride cut through her voice. "Your father would be very disappointed in you." With that, she abruptly left, closing the door loudly behind her. I leaned back against the pillows, staring at the ceiling, and suddenly I felt tears slowly rolling down my cheeks. I didn't want war, I didn't want quarrels, I didn't want to destroy the fragile things that we had left. But how much longer did I have to endure? Be good, understanding, reliable, but at the same time invisible? Dad always taught me that family is the most important thing. But did he really want me to become a shadow? Became nothing? I couldn't sleep that night. The feeling of guilt, obsessive, sticky, as always, clung tenaciously to my chest. The conversation with my mother took place 2 months ago, and since then, a shaky, prickly silence has reigned in the house. Everyone avoided open conflicts, but every step, every look was filled with hidden tension, like before a thunderstorm. And now it's my birthday. I'm 25. And all I have is the gnawed remains of a chocolate cake in a family that doesn't remember me until I remind myself of myself. Christmas came suddenly, as always. Despite the tension, despite how my birthday went, I still wanted the holiday to be warm, real, at least a little magical. I spent weeks picking out gifts, an exquisite scarf for Mom, an expensive whiskey set for Gaspard, a new video game that Mateo was waiting for, and the perfume Gina dreamed of. I even gave my mom extra money for the holiday expenses, hoping that it would somehow help. A week earlier, Mom announced that this year we would spend Christmas at home, quietly, in a family way. Her words sounded like a rebuke, like a reminder of how much they thought I had deviated from their understanding of family. I lovingly packed all the gifts, tied them with ribbons, signed the names, and despite all the absurdity of the situation, I continued to hope. I'm stupid. Christmas morning came without much warning, quietly shrouded in gray clouds outside the windows, and if it hadn't been for the sweet, warm aroma of fresh pastries slowly spreading through the rooms, I might not have felt his arrival at all. The smell of my mother's cinnamon rolls hit my nose like a message from the past, nostalgic, almost magical, which made me believe for a brief moment that all these years full of resentment, innuendos, and alienation were just a bad dream, and now, at this moment, I woke up in the same house as it was before tragedies, to the point of loss, to the interference of strangers in our once quiet, fragile, but native world. I went down the stairs, feeling a slight tingling in my chest, like a child who still believes in miracles, and found everyone unpacking presents. At first, I stood in the doorway, watching how the faces came to life under the shiny tinsel of paper, how joy flashed in their eyes, and how, for a moment, they all became real. Mom clutched the scarf I had given her with an expression as if it were woven from memories. Gaspard, raising his eyebrows, chuckled slightly. Looking at the exquisite set of whiskey, Mateo, without waiting for approval, immediately tore off the wrapper from the video game and exclaimed with glee, and Gina, lifting the perfume bottle, barely nodded in my direction. "Thank you." And in that short pause, while I was catching their fleeting gratitude, I felt something stir inside that hadn't bothered me for a long time: hope. Mom handed me a small, carelessly wrapped package, on the wrapper of which you could still make out the old price tag, on top of which was stuck a piece of duct tape with the inscription "From all of us." I slowly unfolded the paper and saw a gray knitted sweater, simple, featureless, with a tag that said a discount of $12.99 from the previous price of $24.99. I recognized it. It was hanging on the counter at the local supermarket, where I had recently looked for groceries. I put on a smile full of that polite gratitude you learn to give when you're told from a young age that it's important to be grateful for any attention. "Thank you," I breathed, and when I caught my mom's eye, I realized that she really thought she had done something important for me. The festive dinner was arranged on a scale I hadn't seen since my father's time: a huge baked turkey with a golden crust, fluffy mashed potatoes, savory filling, toasted vegetables. Everything was laid out with such love that for a moment I even forgot how long it had been since we had shared a common table. My mother neglected the official dishes, and this in its own way had an even more significant effect, as if she decided that even on a holiday we did not deserve the rare honor that was once reserved for special occasions. When the main course came to an end and there was a short but contented silence at the table, Mom cleared her throat, as she always did before saying something important, reached for Gaspard's hand and announced with a twinkle in her eyes, "We want to share the good news with you. Gaspard has fully recovered and is now working full-time again. Moreover, he has been promoted. He is now a regional manager." There was applause and cheers from the table, which combined the voices of Gina and Matteo, and even I felt a wave of relief sweep through my body. Finally, my shoulders could be free from the burden of bills, daily savings, and constant anxiety. I was already starting to make plans in my head, imagining saving money for a long-awaited trip to Europe, the one I had been putting off for so long, when my mother suddenly continued, this time with an expression on her face that I could not immediately decipher. "We also decided it was time to make some changes," she began, looking directly at me. "Now that we no longer need your financial help, we thought you should move out. Gina will take your room. She needs more space. She's growing." At first, I thought I misheard her, that she was joking, but when I saw Gina happily clapping her hands and, choking with delight, telling me how she wants to paint the walls lavender, I realized that this was not a joke. I barely had time to gather myself when Mom spoke again, this time with a cold, businesslike intonation, as if she was only voicing an administrative decision. "You're already 25, Amelia. Isn't it time to start an independent life? Most people your age haven't lived with their parents for a long time." "Most people my age," I replied sharply, "don't support their parents and their children with their money. Do you really want me to leave now that you don't need me anymore?" Gaspard said nothing, as if it didn't concern him. And Gina, laughing, said, "If you want, you can still continue to pay the bills and buy food. We won't give up free money." There was laughter at the table. Not mine. I sat in silence, feeling my face burn with humiliation, anger, and betrayal. Without saying a word, I got up, slowly, almost ritually, and went to my room. The door slammed shut behind me, deafening as a gunshot, but no one below reacted. Christmas continued. I lay on the bed, listening to the laughter coming from below through the ceilings, and each new burst of merriment was like a blow to the heart, painful, humiliating, final. The memories of the last 3 years flashed before my eyes like in a solid, searing frame. The wedding of my best friend, which I missed because I couldn't afford both the ticket and the utility bill that month, the position I refused because it required moving, and my mother was just asking me to stay, Dad's old Honda, which I still drove, despite the fact that at any moment it could stall forever, because any attempts to save were postponed when Mom, looking at me with her eyes full of reproach, asked for at least a little more. "Just this month," she said. "And my birthdays. God, my birthdays. These 7 years, each time more and more forgotten, less and less significant, more and more reminiscent of a random date on the calendar that no one except me considered worthy of attention, flashed through my memory like the frames of an old, battered film in which the image loses sharpness, then suddenly sharpens to painful clarity. I remembered how once, on the day I turned 22, my mother handed me a set of kitchen towels with a red ribbon, as if by doing so she was trying once again to consolidate my role as a housekeeper in this house. Another year, Gaspard handed me a $5 gift card to a cheap coffee shop on the corner, barely looking me in the eye, saying, "Here's something sweet for you." Not a word, not a gesture, not even a hint of attention, as if I were a random passerby, nothing more. There was also a birthday when Gina and Matteo didn't say a word, didn't even say a simple happy birthday, immersed in their worlds where I didn't exist at all, preoccupied with social media, parties, and their little youthful egocentrism. While, year after year, I didn't just memorize their important dates, but turned them into holidays, diligently, with soul and attention, with a sincere desire to please. On my mother's 50th birthday, I arranged a surprise by gathering her friends, ordering a cake, decorating the living room, and giving her a gold watch, which she had long looked at in a store window, but, as she said, could not afford. On Gina's 16th birthday, I invested in a celebration organized on a grand scale, which later reminded her for a long time how much she was loved. And last year, when Matteo turned 15, I secretly chipped in with Gaspard to buy him the latest game console, exactly the model he wanted, because I knew how important it was for a teenager to be as good as his friends. And now, lying in the dark, I felt a slow but inexorable rage rising in me, not hysterical, not blind, but cold, clear, like a hidden storm. I was a means, a convenience, an ATM, an endless source of resources for them, and now that they no longer needed me, they just threw me away like an unnecessary thing, like the rest of last night's dinner. But it seems they forgot about something important. This house was mine. He belonged to me, not out of generosity, not out of mercy, not because I was allowed to stay. No. It was bequeathed to me by my father, a man who knew how much this house meant to me, the creak of the third step of the stairs, which I always put my foot on, trying not to wake anyone in the morning, the windowsill in my room, where I read for hours wrapped in a blanket when it was raining outside the windows, the old oak cabinets, smelling of dust in the past. It was all my world. My safe place. My legacy. Sadness gave way to anger. I felt a determination growing inside me, not fleeting, not the kind that comes with resentment and goes away with fatigue, but solid as a rock to lean on. I was no longer the naive girl who left for college with a broken heart and the dream of making a family whole again. I wiped my face, sat up in bed, and for the first time in a long time, I told myself, that's enough. There will be no more submission, no excuses, no shame for your anger. I opened my laptop and started searching articles, forums, legal websites. She studied the laws on property rights, the procedure for eviction, and the protection of property owners. We did not sign contracts, we did not arrange leases. It was my home, according to all legal norms. And I finally decided to act. As the hands of the clock approached midnight, and the last sounds of the Born Fund died away outside my room, I already knew what to do. Did they want me to leave? Well, then they'll leave, too. I no longer have to share my home with people who treat me as a secondary element of their lives. The next morning, I woke up before dawn, while everything in the house was immersed in that rare, morning silence, broken only by the slight creaking of old floorboards. I dressed quickly and slipped into the garage, where, among the dusty crates, old cans of paint, and a broken lawn mower, I found what I was looking for, a wooden stake that my father had once used to attach garden signs. Returning to the room, I took out a thick cardboard from the closet, the same one that is usually put inside new shirts, and using a thick red marker, I carefully, slowly, and with exaggerated confidence wrote on it, "For sale." Putting everything I needed into my travel bag, a change of clothes, a makeup bag, documents, a laptop, I once again looked around the room, so familiar, filled with thousands of memories, and, to my surprise, I felt neither pain nor fear. Only determination. That evening, I had already found a small hotel nearby, inexpensive, no frills, but with clean sheets and hot water. It was enough to lay low for a few days, think about everything and start a new chapter. I went downstairs, opened the door, went out onto the lawn, drove a wooden stake into the frozen ground, despite the resistance of the cold, pulled a sign on it and stepped back. The red letters, simple, clear, unambiguous, burned in the morning light like a challenge. Like the truth. I looked at the house, not with longing, but with that strange feeling you get when you finally allow yourself to be honest. And without looking back, she got into the car and drove away. The hotel was quiet. The Christmas guests have already left. I checked in, went up to the room, put my bag against the wall, sat on the bed and turned on the TV so that the room wouldn't be too quiet. I didn't cry. I just sat there and thought about everything that had happened, about myself, about what I had just done. 3 hours after I drove the for sale sign into the frozen ground in front of my house, my phone started literally exploding with notifications, like an avalanche that had woken up, sweeping away everything in its path. At first, there were calls, one after the other, with such frequency that the screen did not have time to darken between them. Mom, then Gaspard, suddenly even Gina, who, it would seem, always did not have enough time even for a routine greeting. Then came a flood of messages, short, demanding, outraged, anxious. The first thing I read was my mother's question, frozen on the screen, as if it contained the essence of all their unexpected anxiety. Amelia, what is this sign doing in our yard? It was followed by a message from Gaspard, call us back immediately, written in the commanding tone he had become accustomed to over the years as the head of a family he had never really been. I ignored everything, giving myself time not to snap, not to succumb to pressure, not to return to that old role, the one that forced me to silently swallow humiliation and continue to sacrifice myself. When the number of missed calls reached 20, I opened the message window and, carefully choosing my words, typed a single but comprehensive letter, my house. I'm tired of how you all treat me. I decided to sell it and buy an apartment next to my job. You should start looking for a new place to live. I don't want to see any of you right now. I pressed send and immediately turned off the phone, allowing myself to enjoy a rare and valuable moment of silence, in which there was no place for reproach, manipulation, or attempts to soften. I wanted to think, I wanted to breathe, I wanted to finally feel like my life belonged to me. The week between Christmas and New Year's passed in a strange, almost surreal silence. I extended my stay at the hotel, replenishing my account automatically, avoiding any contact with the past, still replaying in my head every step that led me to this point. The missed calls multiplied, as if with each new attempt they hoped that my silence was a mistake. But I knew it was a choice. On January 2nd, I found an apartment, simple but cozy, with large windows through which light streamed, with silence in which no other people's claims sounded. I moved my few belongings there, clothes, books, laptop, favorite mug. And then I signed up for a lawyer's consultation. His name was Alvise Harrington, a man in his 50s with a good-natured appearance and attentive eyes in which there was neither condemnation nor skepticism, just business. I told him everything, about my father's will, how I paid the tax on the house when I turned 18, about the 3 years of financial support, about the complete absence of rent or any official arrangements, about how my mother and her new family lived in this house, as if by right, then how all the expenses fell on my shoulders. He listened attentively, making notes in a notebook. Miss Coleman, from a legal point of view, your position is very strong, he finally said, leaning back in his chair. You are the sole legal owner of the property, you pay taxes, utilities, and there is no legally binding agreement between you and your mother. In fact, they are guests in your house. I nodded, a sense of relief burning in my chest, for the first time in a long time not poisoned by guilt. So can I evict them? I asked. Absolutely. We will prepare an eviction notice, specifying a reasonable time, usually 2 weeks. If they refuse to leave the house voluntarily, we can use the official authorities. Then let's do it, I said, and my voice sounded clear, confident, the way I always dreamed of learning to speak. We drafted the document on the same day. The notice was very clear and official. Mom and Gaspard were given exactly 14 days to vacate the living space. Alvise insisted on sending it by registered mail with a delivery notification, so that they would not have the opportunity to say that they had not received anything. 3 days later, my phone rang again. The number was my mother's. I stared at the screen for a long time, not daring to answer. Everything inside me screamed, "Don't take it," but something underlying, perhaps an instinct, or maybe even a shadow of filial affection, made me slide the call icon with my finger. "We need to talk," she said, and her voice was strained, trembling, as if every word was born with effort. We agreed to meet in a cafe in the center of the city, on neutral territory, where there were no walls soaked with insults. I came on time. They were already waiting, Mom and Gaspard, at a corner table by the window, with 2 cups of iced coffee in front of them. Mom's eyes were red, and Gaspard looked confused, like a man who has suddenly been pushed out of his usual comfort. "You can't be serious," Mom began as soon as I sat down. "This is an eviction." "It's wrong. We have nowhere to go. 2 weeks is not enough time to find a place to live and move." "Don't you think," I replied calmly, looking her straight in the eye, "that it was worth thinking about before asking me to vacate my own house for Christmas?" Gaspard tried to intervene, leaning forward, with a conciliatory intonation that I had long been familiar with. "Listen, Amelia. We were upset. It all came out. We said something we shouldn't have. You can go back home. We won't ask you for money. Just, let's forget it." I looked at them, and there was a strange calmness inside me, not anger, not resentment, not pain. Only understanding. The realization that I won't let myself be trampled on anymore. I shook my head, slowly, without malice, but with that cold confidence that comes not from resentment, but from a complete, irreversible understanding of what is happening. "It's too late," I said, looking at my mom, whose eyes were now filled with tears and trembling treacherously. "You've made your feelings clear." And, probably for the first time in my life, I didn't give myself the opportunity to soften the blow, didn't look for excuses for other people's words, didn't want to hear anything but the silence that followed my answer. Mom screamed as if I had hit her, covered her face with her hands, and then, unable to restrain herself, she burst into sobs, choking on words full of reproach and pain. "You are so cruel. After all I've done for you. I raised you, took care of you, sacrificed myself. I'll sue you. For all the bills I paid while you were in college. Do you think we just sat there and did nothing?" I sighed and, without raising my voice, replied, "I expected this. I've already discussed this scenario with my lawyer. So, if you decide to sue me for the bills that you allegedly paid, I will file a counterclaim. In the 7 years that you've lived in my house, you haven't paid a cent for rent. The average rate in our area is $1,800 per month. Multiply that by 84 months. That makes over $150,000. So if we're going to play numbers, you owe me." Her face paled. The blood drained from her cheeks. She frantically grabbed her purse and, without saying another word, ran out of the cafe, leaving behind a trail of perfume and a trembling Gaspard, who got up from his chair and silently followed her. When I left the cafe, paid for the coffee, and headed for my car, I was overcome by a feeling in which there was no triumph, no satisfaction, no sweet revenge, which I so often imagined in my thoughts. It was just a release. That was the point. Not in a relationship, not in love, but in endless self-sacrifice, in eternal pleasure, in attempts to earn what should be unconditional. I realized that all this time I was not fighting for a home, but for the right to be heard, respected, and exist on my own terms. The 2 weeks before the eviction flew by unnoticed. During the day, I immersed myself in my work, finding a strange solace in it, and in the evenings I studied information about repairs, the value of real estate in the area, and the possibilities of a profitable sale if I suddenly decided to say goodbye to this house for good. I didn't make a decision right away. I was just collecting data, as if preparing the ground for a new chapter. On the day of the eviction, Alvise insisted on accompanying me. Such situations can be unpredictable, he said. It's better to be safe. We arrived at the house at exactly 10 in the morning. There was a truck parked in the driveway, its body half filled with boxes, bags, furniture, sloppily wrapped in plastic wrap. Mom, Gaspard, Gina, and Matteo scurried back and forth, unloading the remnants of their presents from the house, which, as it turned out, had never really been theirs. When they saw my car, they froze. Mom pressed her hands to her chest, her face frozen in a mask of anger, and Gaspard put his arm around her shoulders, as if trying to restrain her. Gina and Matteo didn't hide the hatred in their gazes. Those two gazes stabbed into me like daggers, but they didn't hurt me anymore. "Good morning," Alvise said with businesslike calmness, coming closer. "We are here to ensure that the eviction is carried out in accordance with the requirements of the law." Gaspard nodded, his voice hoarse but firm. "There is no need for lawyers. We found temporary housing in another area. We take it off every month until we figure out what's next." I nodded in response. "I'll wait in the car. Let me know when you're done." I was about to turn around when suddenly my mother called out to me, her voice trembling, but there was a challenge in it. "Amelia, do you really think that this is what your father would want? So that you can throw your family out on the street?" I slowly turned around, looked into her eyes, and replied, "Dad wanted me to be safe. To have people around who love me unconditionally and respect my boundaries. He wouldn't recognize the woman you've become." I didn't say it to hurt her. It was the truth. And she knew it. Her face scrunched up in pain, but I felt neither gloating nor triumph, only bitterness that everything had gone so far. For 3 hours, I sat in the car, watching life leave the house, not the one it was before, but the one they brought to it. Furniture, books, kitchen utensils, boxes of clothes, boxes of the past. Alvise went inside from time to time, making sure that they didn't take away anything that was attached to the house, built-in cabinets, plumbing fixtures. We waited until the truck and their cars disappeared around the bend. Only then did they enter the house. I expected it to be empty, but the reality turned out to be worse. There was no refrigerator. Plates, too. The dishwasher, the washing machine, the dryer are all gone. As Gaspard said, the keys were lying on the kitchen counter, next to which there were gaping holes and exposed wiring sticking out, where the lights used to be. There weren't even any toilet paper holders left in the bathrooms. Everything they could unscrew, they unscrewed. Everything that wasn't nailed down was taken away. Alvise examined everything with businesslike calmness, taking pictures and writing on a tablet. "This is out of bounds," he said softly. "Some actions fall under the category of property damage. We will file a lawsuit if you wish." I nodded, looking at the empty house, which, despite the destruction, was quiet for the first time in a long time. Clear. Freely. I walked through each room, slowly, as if trying to realize that I was alone again, in an empty house full of the sounds of the past, reflected in every scratch on the floor, in every trace of furniture, in every dislodged detail, left not out of forgetfulness, but out of a deliberate desire to leave a mark. In my old bedroom, the one where, as a teenager, I used to sit by the window with a book, where I wrote my first letters to my father after his death and where I hid from the world at times when it was especially cool, the carpet was torn out at the edge, as if someone was violently pulling his, intentionally disfiguring the space. There were holes in the walls of Gina's room, where the shelves used to hang, which I helped her fasten when she first moved in and also seemed like a scared girl in need of nursing support. The chandelier in the dining room, the one that hung over family dinners in childhood, where I listened to my dad's stories under its warm light, disappeared, as if the remnants of comfort and warmth had been taken away from the house with it. Do you want to continue legal proceedings? Alvise asked, standing next to him and carefully flipping through the tablet, where photos and notes were already collected. We could file a claim for damages. I looked at him, at his attentive eyes, then looked around the empty walls again, gray and silent, and after a short pause, I shook my head. No, I said softly. I just want this to end. Alvise nodded without asking any questions, and soon left, leaving me alone with the house that once knew my laughter, my tears, my dreams, and which now seemed alien, naked, wounded, but still mine. I sat down on the bottom step of the stairs, because there was nothing else to sit on, and I felt the cold from the floor penetrate through the fabric of my jeans, as if reminding me, it's all real. There was a frightening silence in the house, so thick and viscous that it seemed to be pressing on my chest. Technically, I won. I got back what was rightfully mine. So why was it so empty inside? My phone vibrated, breaking the silence with a short electronic beep. Message from Kayla. How did it go? Do you want me to come in? Please, I replied almost immediately, my fingers shaking not from the cold, but from relief that someone was still around. Half an hour later, the door opened, and Kayla appeared with a bag of Chinese takeout, a bottle of wine, and her portable speaker, from which soft guitar chords could be heard. An ambulance for the soul, she announced with a smile, laying out the containers on the kitchen floor as if it were the most natural dinner in the world. We ate right out of plastic boxes, sitting cross-legged on the floor, laughing and in silence, as only close friends can when words are no longer needed. So what now? What's next? She asked between bites of noodles. Repairs first, I replied, wiping my lips with a napkin. I have already talked to the contractors. I have received the first prices. New plumbing, electrics, household appliances. Then I'll decide whether to sell or stay. And Mom? I sighed, placing my fork on the edge of the container. I don't know. Part of me never wants to talk to her again. And the other one misses her. The way she used to be. Kayla nodded, understanding as always. You don't have to make a decision today. Or even this year. We finished our wine and walked through each room to the sound of music. I shared my ideas, the colors for the walls, the choice of tiles, the kitchen remodeling plan. I started dreaming again. And every time I said my house, I felt it not as a formality, but as a deep truth. It's going to be great, Kayla said, smiling. And it's all yours. That night, I slept on an air mattress in an empty room with a duct-taped window and a temporary lamp on the floor. Despite the inconvenience, I slept better than I had in recent months. There was no fear that someone would judge or shout. I didn't feel like I was invading someone else's space. I no longer felt like an uninvited guest in my own life. In the morning, I woke up to the soft light coming through the window, which was not yet glazed, and for the first time in a long time I allowed myself to stay in bed, just listening to the world wake up. I made a cup of instant coffee using a travel kettle Kayla had borrowed, and sat on the windowsill, the only thing left in my room. Looking at the street, the trees, and the neighbors, I felt hopeful. Quiet, modest, but real. In the following weeks, I immersed myself in the renovation. New appliances have taken their place in the kitchen, plumbers have restored the water supply, electricians have laid new wiring, installed lamps, ventilation. I chose the paint, the floor coverings, the handles for the lockers. Every little thing became part of the healing. I left a for sale sign on the lawn not because I was in a hurry to sell, but as a symbol of freedom. Now it was my choice to sell or stay. Mom called once. I didn't answer, letting my voicemail take the call. Her voice was low, almost a whisper. Emily, I miss you. Can we talk? I saved the message. But she didn't call back. Maybe someday I'll be ready. But first, I need to rebuild myself. When spring came, reviving the garden where Dad used to grow his favorite irises, I realized that I wasn't ready to leave yet. Too much was connected to this place. There's too much left in these walls, and not all of it is pain. I took down the for sale sign and planted flowers in its place. Write a comment on what you think about this story and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like it. See you soon.